Welcome to Hidden Hilltop Homestead. In today's video, I'm going to be finishing up a couple projects and getting ready to tackle some special orders. So right now I am currently putting together my Valentine's Day quilt. I'm only doing one Valentine's this year, and hopefully I can get this wrapped up within the next 2 days and listed to get it sold. So right now I am putting my rows together. That means I'm sewing my quilted squares side by side, and then every time I'm doing a seam, I am trimming the fringe as I go so I don't miss any and I don't have to go back and do any after the blanket's all put together. This is going to be my first completed quilt of 2025 in January, obviously, and I'm hoping to at least get another one done before the end of the month. We're in the second to last week of January, so we got some work to do. So this is row 7, 8, and then I'm about to sew 9 to it, and then I'll have 3 more rows to add, and then we'll have our bottom half done. Alright, bottom half is complete, so this is row 7 through 12, and I'm just going to take this, finish snipping the trim on my last stitch, and then we're going to sew this to the top half of the quilt. So the quilt's all sewn together. I'm currently cutting the fringe for that very last seam that we just did. And then I'm going to put some thread on some bobbins to do the final trim stitch. So that's where I sew a 1/2 inch seam all the way around the outside of the quilt. And then I will do snips just like I'm doing here to cut the fringe. And then our blanket will be done. So we're currently about 3 weeks out from Valentine's Day, just a little bit over 3 weeks, and I got this done a lot later than I planned. I was hoping to have this done by the end, or not the end, the middle of January. Things came up, and I just kind of had to put this off, which is no big deal because we are getting it wrapped up today. But it's just kind of like I had all this motivation going into January of all these things I wanted to accomplish and when I was going to get stuff done. And for the most part, it's been okay. I've been putting up videos as frequently as I wanted to, and I've been getting materials and things ready for special orders. I just haven't been doing a whole lot of sewing, which is very important when you're making quilts. But I am getting back into the groove of things. I'm a lot more balanced as far as time and priorities now too. So hopefully going forward we can get maybe at least one more quilt done before the end of the month and then really just go crazy in February. I also have some unfinished Christmas quilts that I cut squares for, but I never actually put together. So I'm hoping to start working on those a little bit and have them ready for Christmas whenever I have downtime in between special orders, because I'm already 5 orders deep and we're just in January. Okay, so now that we are almost done cutting all this fringe, we're going to get ready to move into the next step, and that's going to be washing and drying. So I'm going to take this quilt and I'm going to put it in my washer. I'm going to wash it by itself, and I'm going to wash it on cold in just like a regular cycle. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of detergent, not a lot. It doesn't need a lot. The basic principle of washing this is to get the fabric to shrink. It will shape the quilt and get all the squares looking really cute and adorable. And then also we want the fringe to start coming apart. So that's the whole point of cutting the fringe on these, is to expose more loose thread so that when it is washed and dried, the cotton will pull apart, the flannel specifically, and it'll make a really nice fuzzy fringe and it'll get soft. And then the back of the quilt will also get soft. We might have a little bit of pilling too. That's kind of been happening with my fabric that I've been using from Joann Fabrics, but that's okay. I have a sweater shaver, so I just go ahead and take care of any spots that I see when it's done. But I'm also going to grab my color catchers, and these are Shout color catcher sheets. They're specifically made to catch running color, and because I have not pre-washed any of my fabric, I want to make sure that I use these. I take 2, sometimes 3 if I have like darker, more pigmented stuff, but I think I should be okay with 2. And then that's going to go in the washing machine. It says on the instructions to put it in the bottom of the washing machine and then put your stuff on top. So that's what I do, and it will catch any type of loose running color so that nothing bleeds onto the other stuff. It's just a precaution to make sure we keep the quilt safe. Moving right along, while that is in the washer and dryer, we are working on project number 2, and that is my sample pieces for a t-shirt quilt. So right now I'm cutting out some squares of sheer weight interfacing. This is Fusible interfacing. It's Pellin style 906F, and I'm going to be using this to fuse to my t-shirt material to prevent it from stretching and moving while I'm quilting it. So I've had a lot of suggestions to do this, and people who make t-shirt quilts suggest to use interfacing because it gives the material its stabilizer essentially, and it just makes your life a million times easier. You'll have less like gapping and bunching whenever you go to sew the stuff together. My only thing with this is I want the edges of the fabric to be flexible and to fray. So my t-shirt quilt size is going to be 14-inch squares. So I'm cutting my interface to 12.5 inches, just a hair under what the batting will be even. So this will hopefully give me plenty of room to make sure that I'm able to still have a very flexible and fluffy fringe. I was worried if I put this clear to the end of the t-shirt material that it would cause issues or make it stiff. So we'll see. We're just going to do it this way, wash and dry it, and we'll see how the sample turns out and see if we need to change it. So this is the stencil that I made. I cut this out of a chunk of cardboard, but it's just a 14-inch square, and it's got a picture frame look so that I could see where I'm lining things up whenever I have like a t-shirt that actually has a design. I'm just using one of my husband's old camouflage t-shirts to cut these out. And I saw a lot of people say that if you're doing t-shirt quilts, to cut the shirt in half first, so cut down the sides, like down the underarms, and then cut each piece individually. Now if I'm doing an actual t-shirt quilt, all I'm going to want is that front panel. I don't need the back panel, so that's what I will do just to kind of make life easier. But I need 2 panels for this test, so that's why we're doubling up. And I'm definitely going to get a square plastic stencil, just make my own out of some kind of poly plastic, because this works, but I also catch the edge of the cardboard, and that kind of affects the shape of the square. So definitely going to be making my own stencil just to make my life like a million times easier. But let's get this cut out and we'll move on to the next step. So right now I'm just following the directions that were on the paper that this came with, and I'm setting up an ironing station, which this is not going to be my permanent solution. This is just, again, a test to see if I can use this. So I have a tabletop, and then I have a towel, a very thick towel, which I've ironed things before using a towel on this tabletop, and it's been okay. The tabletop gets a little bit warm, but it doesn't like melt the finish off or anything. And it says to do the shiny part towards the back side of your fabric, because you're gluing this essentially to your fabric to create a stiffening thing. And then you're also supposed to use a cloth between your iron and the fusible part. So I have my iron set on medium because I think that's what it's supposed to be at. and we're just gonna see how this works. It doesn't really have like super specific information and half of it's cut off, so I'm kind of just winging it here. But the objective is to glue that interfacing to the back of the square. So I don't think it's doing anything. Yeah, it's not sticking to anything. It's not sticking to the fabric or the cloth. I might have this on backwards because it's not doing... Oh gosh. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna jump online real quick and see if I can find an instructional video for this, because I definitely am not doing something right.
I'd like to introduce you to Pellon's 906F Fusible Sheer Weight Interfacing.
Great video. I was doing it definitely wrong. I had the interfacing wrong side, so you want the bumpy part facing your fabric that you're gluing it to, right? Because that's the glue side. It says shiny side on the instructions on the paper, and that's not the glue side, so I don't know what that's about. But I cranked up my iron too, so we're gonna give this another go. I changed it to the steam setting, and I think that's what I need. So interfacing is bumpy side / glue slide down. In the instructional video, she had the interfacing on the ironing board and then the fabric on top, but I'm not doing it that way because I need it to be in the center. So I flip-flopped it. And also, you're supposed to hold and press for like 10 seconds. You're not supposed to iron. So we're doing that all the way across, and then I'm just gonna peel it up and take a look, and it looks like it's actually doing something, so it should be sticking, which it is. Awesome. Okay, so let's just keep doing this, and it should work. So I checked my table underneath, and it's still doing okay, so we're good there. This is working. I probably will just get a bigger chunk of like scrap fabric to use instead of this t-shirt, but it's working. So I just did all the way around and pressed, and I'm just checking now to see if I missed any spots to make sure it's gonna stay. Now this does make the fabric just a teeny tiny bit stiffer. It's not that much stiffer, but it definitely doesn't stretch, and that's the goal here, because sewing stretchy material is a pain in the butt, and quilting stretchy material is even worse. So I'm just gonna check this over real quick. Yeah, the stretchiness is gone. Now it's still stretchy on the edges because, you know, we have like almost a little over an inch between the edge and the interfacing, but it looks good. So this might work. All right, I got both pieces of the camo t-shirt material interfaced. They have been ironed and glued and all that good stuff. So now I'm taking my flannel and I am going to put my batting smack dab in the middle. This is just like all of my other regular rag quilts. It's just we're working with bigger squares. So 14-inch square batting, or I'm sorry, 14-inch backing material, which is flannel. And then I have a 13-inch batting, and I'm just centering that in this. And then I have the 14-inch t-shirt square that has 12.5-inch square interfacing, if that makes sense, I hope. So I'm just going to put this down and pin all the way around. I don't really know how many pins I need, but I'm just going to do what I feel like is adequate to make it not jump around a whole lot, because there's a lot more surface area to quilt with this. And we're also going to be quilting this differently than I usually do. I normally do an X through the center, but with a t-shirt, I'm going to have to quilt around print. So we're going to do it a little bit differently. So now comes the fun part of doing some research on my sewing machine, and I already have everything set up, but essentially I got my book out, which you can see over here on the right, and I was looking on what to do for free motion quilting, because this is a electronic fancy schmancy machine. So I thought it would be a little more complicated than it was, and it turns out it wasn't. So exciting. Anyways, basically I have my regular presser foot. I took that off and put on a free motion foot, which is very different than how my brother machine was set up. My brother machine was like a $200, I guess you call it a domestic sewing machine, which this one is too, but it was like a whole different setup. Like I had to physically take off a bunch of stuff and put on a whole new setup to do a free motion foot. Free motion means that I'm able to just like slide the fabric all over the place and just do like willy-nilly quilting marks. So this required just swapping out a foot, which was easy peasy. And then when you swap the foot out, you change your menu on your stitches, and there is a free motion quilting menu. So you just select that and you select what kind of stitch you're going to do. And then the computer will automatically lower the feeding teeth things and make it to where you are, you have to control how to move the fabric around. And I'm so thankful that my mother-in-law had the books, because that made things a million times easier. I didn't have to watch any videos. I just had to do like some quick little look up there on my manual, and we're ready to go. So now I'm just going to try to do some kind of squiggly design, and basically I'm trying to see how far I can get my stitches apart. I'm going to leave some more open spaces, because on a regular t-shirt, my plan is to do squiggles and then go in between like the lettering and pictures, so that I can make sure that everything's like quilted pretty without putting any type of lines through the actual graphics. So right here, I'm turning my work, which is completely unnecessary, because I'm still like, oh wait, I'm not using a free motion. And then I remember, oh yeah, I am. So I start using it right. Free motion just means you can just move it all over the place like how I'm doing now. But it takes a little bit of getting used to, because you have to have a consistent speed, and you have to be careful not to move too quickly, to try to keep your stitches lined up right and have like good spacing, if that makes sense. But something you could also do with this is get some free motion stencils, and that's what a lot of people use to keep consistent designs. My plan is just to have a design that starts in the corner and ends in a corner, so that on the back, when everything's put together, it looks like the quilting just seamlessly runs together, which I'll show you here shortly. Not bad for a first pass. I feel like I got the spacing down a little bit better. It's a little wonky, but that's okay, because this is what we're doing with practice. So I'm just going to keep going and try to do the other corner to corner stitching and squiggles, and we'll see how it turns out. So I think I'm going to do less pins, or I might even try to do some clips. I have some quilting clips, and I might get more. We'll see. But I'm having a little bit of trouble with too many pins, so I'm going to space my pins out more on my next ones that I do, and I feel like that's going to help, because I'm trying to get close to the edge and I'm having a little bit of difficulty. But as far as like the quilting and the squiggling, it's going quite well, and I feel like I have a really good pace. So here is our finished block on the front. Looks pretty good. There's a few spots where there's a little bit of bunching, and I think there's another one somewhere where I like grabbed a little fold of the fabric, which it isn't terrible, but I'm going to try to avoid that. And then I left a big open space here on the right, and that caused a little bit of bunching. I think that was part of my problem, but I'm trying to see how well this will hold up when it gets sewn together and then washed. So not bad. I think it looks good. So I'm going to trim off the extra, because the back squares are more accurate than the front squares were, like as far as actually being squares. And when I sew these two squares together, I want to make sure everything lines up. So I'm trimming off the extra from the front, just like this. Now going forward, I will have my stencil be a little bit more accurate, and then I won't have as much trouble with trying to make sure I have everything squared up. Because if your squares are not straight when you sew stuff together, you're going to end up getting a wonky, like off-center blanket, essentially. So I'm just using my very, very sharp scissors and trimming this the best that I can. Now we are going to sew the two blocks together. So just like how I sew all my other ones, you're putting the backs together, sewing a 1/2 inch from the edge, straight line, and that's going to join our two squares together and create fringe. I'm just doing a 2 square sample with this, so when I get done with this, I'm just going to go ahead and trim the fringe. Same way, same spacing. I'm trying to keep it consistent as how I normally do it and see if I need to make any adjustments. I'm a little bit worried I might need to do longer fringe, but I really won't know until I wash this because the squares are so much bigger. I might need to do like a 3/4 fringe instead of a 1/2 inch, but again, we'll see after it gets washed and dried. But as of right now, I think it looks pretty good. I brought my husband in to give me a second opinion, but I think it looks nice. Of course, you know, a full quilt is going to be a 5x5, so. Now I'm just doing the 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around the outside of the quilt, and then when I'm done with that, I will trim it just like I did that middle seam. So after this, I'll be able to pop this in the washer and dryer, and we'll see what we end up with, and hopefully it looks good. As soon as I'm comfortable with how this turns out, I'm going to start on the t-shirt quilt order that I have, and that's going to go by very fast because I only have to make 25 blocks. And the quilting will take a little bit of time, but the assembly is going to be so quick. Alright, we are done. It is trimmed. So now I'm just going to throw it in the washer with a couple towels and then dry it, and then I'll see you when it's done. Alright, so this turned out exactly how I was picturing it. It looks good. The quilting looks good. The wash and dry looks good. It's flat. It's like, it's not stiff, but it's cohesive, I should say. The fringe is perfect. I think the length is totally fine. The way the t-shirt fringed, I really like that too. The flannel looks good. The quilting held up fine. You can't even see the bunching that we saw whenever I was sewing. So that's good. Now this is a camo pattern, so I'm not really sewing around like words and stuff. But I think we're going to be fine. The spacing was fine, the spots with big spacing, and then the tight circles and things were good too. So I'm totally excited with how this turned out, and I'm ready to move on to my regular t-shirt quilt. Okay, so the Valentine's quilt is washed and dried. Right now I'm using my sweater shaver to trim off any little pieces of pilling that I have on the back. There's a little bit, not a lot, but I just want to take care of it and make sure it's good to go. Then after this, I'm going to take some pictures and get it listed on Facebook and get it sold and off to its new home. So I took these pictures and put them up on my Facebook, and the quilt sold within like 26 hours, and it also got me a special order for a crib quilt, so that's very exciting. So thank you guys so much for checking out this video and watching me complete 2 projects. I feel very motivated and ready to tackle the rest of January and bring on February. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye!